Good morning. This is the Blaine's World webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and get more information about past and future shows at my website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Catherine Yael Serota, an author, storyteller, mentor, and philanthropist, being my guest today. Catherine, wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this.
You're certainly welcome.
We'll give a big wave to everybody who's watching.
Oh, hello.
Okay, that is Catherine. And Catherine is a native of the Hawk Creek community and is now living in Flag Pond, Tennessee, with her husband, Wallace Shirley. She's a member of the Asheville Storytelling Circle and the Jonesboro Storytellers Guild. And so, Catherine, you and I met a little while ago, but for the benefit of the people who missed that show, in terms of storytelling, as a kid, did you always know you wanted to be a storyteller?
No, I had no idea I wanted to be a storyteller.
What did you want? Where did you grow up, by the way?
Where did I grow up?
Yeah.
I grew up in after I was born, I was brought home to Haw Creek community in eastern Buncombe County, but I had lived in Western North Carolina all of my life, with the exception of going off to higher education at different places in the state and out of state. But I never knew I wanted to be a storyteller until probably about, I guess, 8 or 9 years ago. My husband, who is my husband now, Wallace Shealy, took me to a Christmas party of the Asheville Storytelling Circle, and people stood up to tell stories. And at the end of it, they said, "Is there anyone else here who wants to tell a story?" Well, I didn't want to tell a story, but Wallace kind of pushed me forward. And people said, "This is your first story? Oh my goodness." So at that point, I realized I might have a future as a storyteller.
What was that story about?
That story is in my upcoming book. It was called The Awfulest Christmas Tree.
Great. And so before that, so that's kind of cool. You've only done this 8 or 9 years. What had you done before that?
What I had done before that? Well, actually, I did have a story published in the UNC Asheville book, their fine arts book, um, when I was 12 years old. But I was a faculty child. My mother was on staff there, and I just submitted something. I was kind of enthralled by the story of myself at that time. So I wrote a very comprehensive story of myself as a 12-year-old, and it was published. But I guess for about 40, 42 years, I worked in human services as a foster care worker, a child abuse and neglect and dependency investigator, a treatment worker, a family reunification worker. I had a short stint as a private psychologist, private practice. I worked at Broughton Hospital for 5 years and in community mental health, all of this for about 42 years.
And I would
So that was
imagine,
my area.
and I would imagine though, during those 40 plus years, you were getting a bunch of stories there too, or you were certainly hearing a bunch of stories in that other
Well,
career.
yes, I truly was, but because of professional ethics, not to speak of HIPAA, I can't tell any of those stories.
Well, unless we can always change names or whatever, and characters. But so you did that for a bunch of years. Then all of a sudden, I guess what you retired at some point in time. And so I'm amazed by you because you must have been what, like the youngest person ever into the field. You started like age of 7. You started your career, the 40-year career. And after 40 years, right? 7 or 8
That's
was it?
very nice of you.
Okay, but the youngest employee ever in that particular industry. So then you retired, and shortly after that, you then attended the Christmas party.
No, I actually attended that Christmas party about 8 or 9 years ago,
Right.
and I retired. I retired in 20 2021, right the month before COVID went big.
Okay.
So
Wow.
I was fortunate there.
So back up then. That's quite a story. So you were still working, but you went to this Christmas party, And then the bug all of a sudden, your husband also prior to that had been a storyteller.
Yes, he had been telling stories for quite a long time. In fact, he is notable as a certified, bona fide liar. He won the Southeastern U.S. Liars Contest in Laurinburg, North Carolina, a few years back.
So that must have been tough though, being married to the guy, because then whatever he's telling you, to differentiate between telling you the truth and telling a lie, that must have made married life challenging, I guess.
Well,
Um,
actually, I turned the tables on him, Blaine. Last year, I won the Liars Contest down at the Stone Soup Storytelling Festival in South Carolina.
did he enter that also?
Yes, he did, and I
Well,
won it. So now we're a pair of liars.
oh, is that incredible? Someday I'll have to tell me more about that. And the liar stories, the whole idea, you just make up stuff, or what's the idea behind it?
Well, you can, the idea is that you tell a very short 5-minute lie of a story, and you make it just as outrageous as you can, or you can make it as believable as you can, and then at the end, spring it on the audience. So there are all kinds of ways to win a liar's contest.
That must be a lot of fun, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is. I told a story about a young girl who was not having any boyfriends, and her mother was getting worried, so she bought her a blow-up bra. And the girl, unfortunately, wore the bra on a mission trip that was going over the Andes into a mission in the backwoods of Peru. And as the plane ascended and developed, yes, you know exactly what happened. And then bang, and everybody thought there was a terrorist on board, and the pilot came running back with a drawn revolver, and they put her off at the next landing strip and then charged her $400 for an unauthorized landing.
And I love that the kicker at the $400. So it sounds almost believable. The adding that $400 really adds to it. It said, yeah, well, it
Yes.
could have been. You probably would have been great. What's the game people play? Two truths and a lie. Have you ever heard of that game?
Yes, I have.
So you'd probably be pretty good in that one too, huh?
Well, I do pretty good at five card stud too.
Are you really?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I once won $134 for my husband and his friends playing cards, and they never invited me back.
But again,
They
let's
thought
see.
that they were going to take all of my money, and guess what?
Okay, so that's your career as a card player. Interesting. So let's get back to you just have me lose it here a little bit. I just can't believe this. Telling you look like such a nice woman and tell lies. I can't believe you would do that. So,
Thank you.
but anyway, so you took a while, then you started hitting the storytelling circuit yourself. When did you start telling stories at competitions and events?
Well, I guess the very first, the first largest event I told at was an event called Telebration, which is an internationally recognized and observed day of storytelling. It's always the last Sunday before Thanksgiving, and people gather together and tell stories. And we are not paid for it. It's one time when we give our talents freely, and it's simply a celebration of story. And it happens all over the world, is the really neat thing about Telebration. So that was my first time really in the public eye. It was in Asheville at the Folk Arts Center. There were over 200 people there. I was scared to death, but I pulled it off.
I was going to ask you, so you were scared to death the first time. Do you get scared at all now telling stories?
Well, yes, I get nervous. I get nervous before I stand up. And then when I take the stage and stand before the microphone, all the fear just melts away. And I get so excited. And I think to the audience, boy, I'm going to give you a gift. And I start talking, and it's just wonderful.
And so when you tell a story, talk about how long they typically are.
I'm sorry?
Talk about how long the stories typically are. How long do they take to
Oh,
tell?
usually about 12 minutes, although a lot of the stories in my book are concert length, which is 45 to 50 minutes.
Now, talk about the whole concept because a lot of people are kind of blown away by the fact that these stories, I guess you could write them out, but they're not necessarily written out. Is that correct? You're not reading a story.
Some people don't write them out until they decide to publish. Then they
Right.
write them out. When I do a story, I think about it. It kind of percolates around my mind for 2 or 3 days, and then I sit down at the computer and I tap it out in about an hour, hour and a half. So that's how I do my stories.
So,
And so all of them are in manuscript form, which makes it easy when you publish.
when you're going to write the book, we'll talk about it in a second. But when you write them out, then when you deliver them, do you read them or do you talk off them? How do you do that?
Oh, no, no, no. When you perform your stories, you do not read them. You don't
Uh,
have any notes.
right. When
It's
you
off
don't,
the top of your head.
can you have notes if you want them?
No, it's not considered professional
Oh,
to have
really?
notes. Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess you write it out. It's interesting how you said that, but I guess you practice it so many times in your mind that you then feel comfortable delivering it.
I think when people first begin to tell stories, they read their story over and over and over again, just like you said, they begin to get it in their mind. But as you get to be a more accomplished storyteller, you don't think of, okay, that's the end of page one. Now I'll go on to the
Right.
top of page two. But you instead have what is known as a storyboard in your mind. You see the scenes. You see everybody in them and what they're saying to each other, and it comes out of your mouth. So that's what more seasoned storytellers do. They
Now,
don't they don't tell from rote.
are you considered a seasoned storyteller now?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, let me ask
Somewhat.
you about how many ballpark, how many stories do you have that you could deliver at any one point in time?
I think my portfolio has over 80 stories
Wow. And
right
you
now.
and you could go back and tell any of them with a little thought process?
Well, with a little brush up, I could go back and tell any of them.
Wow. How many, your husband, how many stories does he have?
I'm not sure how many stories he has. He He has several good stories about his years at the University of South Carolina. He has several good stories about family members. And I think I've probably heard him tell about 20 stories in the time we've been together.
Now, let me ask you a question that it reminds me of talking about my dad, is that I loved hearing my dad tell stories, and he was a great storyteller. But it
Hmm.
always bothered me, Catherine, that my mother would stop him in the middle of a story or say, "You've told that," or "I've heard it, too many times." And I think
Hmm.
that's a shame because I don't know about you, but I love hearing stories over and over again. Do some people have that attitude, which I think is a lousy attitude, that they cut off a storyteller and say, "I've heard that already"?
Oh, no, I've never heard that done because as we tell, every time we tell, we tweak it in the
Okay,
telling. So you're performing before an audience and there's a give and take
good
between you and
point.
the audience. And you see how they're responding. And you can actually switch gears in midstream and tweak it a little bit and take the story in a different direction. Because what you're wanting is for connection between yourself and your audience. And if it's not happening, then you can look at their expressions, you can look at their body language, and maybe being trained as a psychologist helps me with that more than other storytellers. But you can look at those things and see how they are receiving you, and then you can tweak it to make it more palatable for them.
But back to you or back to your husband as well. So he's heard your stories a couple times, would you say?
Oh yes, he's heard a lot of my
What,
stories.
what I'm getting at, and it's kind of cool that it doesn't happen with the two of you, is that like if you hear his story over and over again, does it, do you ever get bored of it, or do you always find it interesting, even though you've heard the story?
I always find it interesting because, like I said, every time we tell it a little bit differently. We tell it a little bit differently. And he and I talk to each other as we're practicing our stories, in that he may say, if you were to phrase this in this way, it'd be better received. And I might say, why don't you use this term instead of that term? It sounds a little bit like it flows better. So, we're constantly talking to each other about how we do things in
And
the
so
storytelling
before you're
world.
going to have a major event or before you're going to be a storytelling event, So the two of you will practice in front of each other?
Sometimes we do. I am more apt to practice in front of him, and he is more apt to keep what he's telling a secret until right before he tells it, or he may change his mind about what he's going to tell.
Well, I think that would be kind of cool. Like I said, the element of surprise. Talk about something too that you're working on now, Catherine. Are you going to be presenting at upcoming? It's late, it's already June now. The Blue Ridge Storytelling Summit. What's that all about?
Okay, that is happening on Saturday, June the 28th. It's from 10 to 2. And it's going to be presented at the Center for Pioneer Life, which is at 134 Joe Young Road. That is off of Shoal Creek, about halfway between Burnsville and Spruce Pine on Highway 19. It's that main road that runs between Burnsville and Spruce Pine.
And so,
The story,
yeah, I'm sorry, tell about the event. What is it?
Okay, there are going to be four storytellers there. We are going to have a food truck. Pig and Grits is the food truck that's going to be there. There's going to be live music with a spinning wheel, a duo. And we're each going to tell one story. And the tellers are um, Larry Pearlman from Black Mountain, a member of the Asheville Circle, Sherry Lovett from Old Fort, who is very well known as a teller of folk tales and Celtic tales. She is also a member of the Asheville Circle. I am telling, and we also have, let's see, Michael Reno Harrell, who is
Okay.
a nationally famous storyteller.
I once had the pleasure of interviewing him on my show. Great storyteller, nice guy. I had somebody gave me his CD afterwards, and just
Mhm.
loved listening to his stories. G- great stories. So now you're tempting me. So he's going to be there as well.
He's going to be there. He's our featured teller, and he also, in addition to telling, he also plays the guitar and the banjo.
So each of the tellers. So you're going to tell for how long is your story?
We each have about 20 minutes, and Michael Reno he'll have almost an hour. And my husband, Wallace Shealy, is our MC.
Okay, so it should be quite an event. Is there a fee to this to attend?
Yes, it's the tickets are $10.
Okay.
We wanted to make it a low amount so that people in the community would feel like they could come. As I'm sure you know, Yancey County was
Right.
very heavily hit by ALEN, and we are putting on this event to give people an afternoon of fun. It's family friendly. They can bring their children and their dogs. Not that dogs are good storytelling listeners, but as part of the audience and just have the opportunity to refresh themselves a little bit in the magical world of storytelling.
So, if folks want more information on that particular event, what's the best bet?
Say again?
If folks want to get more information about that particular
Oh,
event, what,
Yes, they can look up Center for Pioneer Life. They are on the web. They have an extensive website, and they do quite a bit of community work there. The whole of that property has been in the Young family since the 1850s. And the Center for Pioneer Life is the reconstructed cabin that they lived in, a traditional Appalachian dog trot cabin, as well as various farm outbuildings. And they have a working farm there. They put on several events, like all kinds of demonstrations. They have the History Happy Hour on the first Tuesday of every month. This month, the person who's presenting is Mitzi Moody, who has written several novels about the Cloudland Hotel, which was built on the very top of 6,000-foot Roan Mountain in 1895. And my book features a story about Cloudland Hotel also. So she's coming tomorrow night at 6:30, and that is a free event to the public.
and that's going to be at this same facility?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's at the
And
center.
so, talk about if folks come, because it got me interested now in this. If folks come on the 28th, Um,
Mhm.
do they have to bring chairs or is there seating? How is that?
Well, there is seating. If they have a favorite chair that they would prefer, they can bring that. If they want to bring a blanket and just crash on in the grass with the kids and the dogs, that's fine too. We're going to be telling from the porch of that 1857 cabin,
Okay, and so the time frame work you said is 10 to 2?
10 to 2.
Okay. But if folks are interested, for example, to hear you or Michael, is that listed on the website somewhere? What time you?
Yes, it is. It's listed under events on their
Okay,
website.
but the time, do you know the time you're going to be presenting that day?
That I'm presenting?
Yeah.
Um, no, I'm not sure when I'm going on, but it'll be sometime between 10 and 2.
Okay, I'll have to get back to you on that in terms of necessarily being there for the whole day, but that sounds like an exciting event. And talk a little bit about Catherine, something you told me off the air that in addition to this, and you told me the first time I spoke with you, you now have put a lot of your stories in a book together.
Yes, I have a collection of over 25 stories that I've written over the past 7 years, including a Jack tale that I have written called Jack Out a While in the World, as well as a very carefully and extensively researched story on Captain Otway Burns. Now,
No, take the first one though. I'm not familiar with it. So Jack Tale is what?
okay, Jack tale is a traditional Appalachian tale that the subject Jack, originated in Scotland, Wales, Ireland, back in probably the 1600s. And he came over with the settlers to our highlands from those areas in the British Isles. And he is a young man between, I guess, maybe 12 and maybe 20. And he is kind of genetically lazy, but very, very clever and always looking for a way to get around things and to make his fortune. A lot of the time, he sits on his mom's cabin front porch thinking about how he can do this. Now, if you know the folks' tale, Jack and the Beanstalk, then you know Jack.
So got that. If folks want to read the book, the 25 stories, or how many you have in there, how do you come up with the ideas for the stories?
Well, I divided it up into the book ended up into several sections. I had one section that I called Beginnings, another one I called Heritage, one that I called Jack Tale, and I kind of divided the stories up that way. And they stretch all the way from the original story, The Awfulest Christmas Tree, all those years ago, to Captain Otway Burns that I finished, I think, about a week before the book went to the editor.
Now, when you write a story, do you sit down and write like every morning for 5 hours in the morning or 2 hours in the morning? What's your writing process to the stories?
Heavens, no. Well, my writing process is quite I guess you could say it's flibbity gibbety. I write when I feel a story coming on. I am not a disciplined writer. I've got too many other things going on. Wallace and I support several organizations in Asheville and Montford Park Players
Right.
and the Guild activities. The International Storytelling Center, we're supporters of that. I grow a large garden every year and harvest it and can and freeze the produce for my husband and I. We have 87 acres in Flag Pond, and a goodly amount of that has been landscaped by me. So I work on that. We built our house the year before we were married in 2019. So there's lots to do there. And we're constantly doing. Right now, I'm not in Tennessee. I'm talking to you from Middleton Place on the Ashley River Road in Charleston. We came down here for a few days of rest. So.
So back to the book then, the one thing I'm thinking about, will there be any liar's tales in that one too? Or how will I know? So my concern about if I meet you in person or read the book, how will I know what's the truth and what's fibbing?
I think that's probably the most commonly asked question that we storytellers answer. And in my case, a lot of the things that are in that book, a lot of the stories are based on a truism. Now, after that, facts just might diverge, but they're all based on something that is true. And of the stories that happened to me personally, they all started off true. But I guess you could say I embroider them a little bit.
Okay, which is, I guess that's what storytelling is about. How long does it take you to get a story after you write it out longhand? You explain the process. How long does it take you before you're ready to actually tell it?
Well, I have written a story before and decided that I was on the program for the Jonesboro Storytellers Guild on Tuesday, and I finished the story on Saturday. I think there's one instance when I told it on Tuesday. It was a little bit rough, but of course, the more you tell a story, the more polished it becomes.
Do you have a favorite story to tell?
A favorite story. I'm not sure. I really like the Christmas tree story, but I think I've progressed a bit since then. Probably a story I wrote about a young boy in a southwestern Virginia coal camp. And the name of that story is Reuben May. I
If
think that's probably my favorite right now.
if somebody's listening to this and decides they want to become a storyteller or just get into it, the field, what do you tell them?
Well, what I would tell them is the Asheville Storytelling Circle meets on the third Monday not evening at 7 o'clock, third Monday evening of every month. And they meet at the Friends Gathering Place off of Merriman Avenue in Asheville. And I would say come and listen to stories and see what you think. And the circle is also a very safe place for someone to stand up and tell their first story. Just like I did at their Christmas party. Just stand up and tell your first story. Now, the Jonesboro Guild is a little bit different, Blaine, in that we are juried storytellers, and there's a mentoring process there, and then there's an audition process, and the members have sheets to critique the storyteller and their presentation, and then we vote on it. And if you are showing promise and have a good story, and we think that you can do a good presentation on stage, then we vote you in as a member of the Guild. So it's two ways of doing it, two different places, one in Asheville, one in Jonesboro, Tennessee.
At the one in Asheville, then, if somebody wants to tell a story, they just go there and volunteer, or raise a hand, or do they have
Well,
to
you
sign
just
up?
go in and sign in as either a member or a visitor. And then there's another two columns that say, do you want to tell a story tonight? Yes or no? And if you do, then you just check yes and you get worked into the docket.
And how long are the stories typically?
They are limited to 10 minutes so
Okay,
that everyone who wants to tell can get a chance.
gotcha. And so what happens if somebody goes over the 10 minutes? Do they get the hook?
Well, they get a card that tells them where they are. 2 minutes to go, 1 minute to go, 0 minutes to go, out of here. So,
Does God really say out of here?
no, that's what I say, out of here.
It should though. So great advice to get into it. How about the other thing you mentioned, which is I think kind of cool? Do you recommend that people write the stories out?
I think, however, a person feels comfortable in crafting their story is up to them. We have another nationally known storyteller, very famous storyteller, and when he brought out his second book this past year, which was a collection of his stories, he had to write them all from memory. He had never written a single one down, and that person has 150 stories committed to memory.
Who is that person?
That person's name is Tim Lowry.
Okay, wow, that's quite something. 150 stories. That's a lot of stories.
Well, he's younger than we are, so.
Is it really? Wow, very exciting. What do you see moving forward? So you're really into this. After the book's published, do you have any plans or things you'd like to be doing with respect to storytelling in the future?
Well, after the book comes out, I already have a second book that I've begun. It's called Three Continents, and it will be three stories about family members who lived on three separate continents.
Very cool. And what gave you the idea to write that story?
Well, I had written several stories about my unknown Jewish progenitors who perished during the Holocaust, and I did never had any way of finding out about them. And my parents both passed in the year 2000, which was before I became very much interested in family history and stories. So there was really no one to ask. So what I have done is I have taken a shtetl in my mind and created it and put it in Western Russia or Ukraine, whichever area it was at the particular time, since those two countries exchanged boundaries so often, and have made made up a family out of that. So if you don't have a family, you can always make one up.
Well,
Uh,
I guess that's one of the cool things, I guess, about storytelling in general. It gives you the fact, I never thought about it, Catherine. That's a great bit of advice. I guess also, by the same token, if you don't like your life, you can reinvent your life as a story in a different way, right?
Well, I think a person can reinvent. I think a lot of us reinvent ourselves about every 7 years.
Right.
And if you look back at your history, you may find yourself being a different person or going in a different direction or having developed in a certain way in increments of 7 years, whether it's 7 years or 14 years or 21 years. It's really interesting how that occurs. And I found that to be true in my own life.
Catherine, if folks want to get in touch with you, find out either more about some of the things you mentioned or what you're going to be doing in the future, what's the best way to keep track of you?
Well, I'm very responsive to my Gmail, which is Catherine Yael Serota at gmail.com. I'm
Let me
very responsive
let me
there.
just have you spell that if you would, please, Catherine.
I sure will. CATHERINEYAELSEROTA at gmail.com.
Very nice, thank you. And how else aside from that?
Yael Tales, YAELTALES.com.
And what, that's your website?
Yes, that's the website.
So people can find out also about your upcoming the show we just talked about or about the book. They can find the information there as well.
Yes, yes, they can find information there.
Just curious, do you have any of your stories posted there as well?
I have several stories posted on YouTube.
Oh, okay. That will be eventually in the book.
Yes, several of those will be in the book.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'd like to thank you for being my guest this edition of the Blaine World webcast. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, for handling this show. And I'll hopefully see you on the 28th of June or sometime in the future. I'd love to meet you some point in time. That'd be great. Thank you,
Well,
Catherine.
please come out and hear stories on the 28th.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. See ya.
You're welcome.